in a rising market, it's always best if you can buy and sell in the same market or as close to as you possibly can. Look, it is a problem, whether you buy first or whether you sell first or whether you can actually manage all those balls in the air at the same time. Adam Nobel is from Space Property. He joins me. G'day, Adam.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good. There's a problem a lot of people face, and it's a problem that many people ask me about from time to time too. So is it, in your opinion, better to buy first and then sell, or sell first and then buy?
It's a great question. To be honest, it divides people as much as the old toilet paper over or under debate.
Hey, well, what are you, over or under? I know I'm over.
I'm over as well. I'm a man of logic. It is a personal choice and it depends on your circumstances.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, I think selling first is more logical. The biggest risk when you sell first is inconvenience. By that I mean you may have to move twice. There are, however, strategies to avoid this, such as having a long settlement or renting the property back, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
With buying first and then selling, the risks are that you may miss out on the property you want to buy if you can't offer clean conditions. You might undersell your home because you can't hold out for a better contract. You might end up having a mortgage on two properties, or you realise you've overspent as your current property might not be worth what you thought it was.
Yeah.
So I think if you have to buy first, there might be that you found your dream home and you just simply have to go for it. My tip would be to ask your agent if your suburb and your type of property is in a seller's market or in a buyer's market. In a seller's market, you should feel a lot more confident that you'll be able to sell your property quickly. The other tip for the listeners I would give is that, if you have to buy first again, ask the purchaser if they'll accept the long settlement period, so 90 days, 120 days. That way you've got plenty of time to sell your property.
You're better off doing that at the point of listing rather than, when you're talking to the agent, say, look, what I really want here is I'm looking for a longer settlement. That way you as an agent can tell buyers, look, if it's convenient to you, these people are looking for a longer settlement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get it up front, yeah. Mate, we're really pushed on time here. I want to get to another thing that is, say, for instance, I look around. I've still got my place, and I find a place that I want to buy, but I haven't yet put mine on the market. I then put a subject to sale of my property on the offer that I make to someone else. What impact is that going to have on my negotiation power?
The impact is huge. I see buyers miss out on their dream property every week because sellers say no to a subject to sale clause. In a market like we're in today, which is quite hot, I'd say 9 out of 10 sellers, well, from my experience, won't accept that clause. I had one 2 weeks ago where a client was offered $100,000 more above the other offer for a subject to sale clause versus a cash unconditional contract. The seller went with the cash unconditional contract because they didn't want to be tied up into
even though it was a lower figure.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, $100,000. So,
wow, that's amazing. Just thinking about pressure for a moment. If there's just as much pressure on a seller if they've found a property they want to buy, then they put a contract on it that's not subject to sale, but they've got a longer settlement. They're still under a fair bit of pressure. They might relax at the start and think, we'll just wait and see what the market says if I've got 2 or 3 months to sell my place. But then as it gets closer, they're under enormous pressure, aren't they?
Look, they can be, but, there would be pressure on the buyer in that instance. But if they're really confident that their property will sell, which is what they're saying when they tie a seller up with a subject to sale clause, then I really do think that the risk should be on the buyer and not the seller. I am biased there, obviously. I'm a seller's agent and my job is to protect their best interest at all times, and that's what I do. But I think the only way a buyer can really put their money where their mouth is here is by having a longer settlement and taking on the risk themselves. If they don't, then really how confident are they that they'll sell their home within the assigned time frame and not muck people around?
There is one other solution we haven't touched on yet, and it's subject for another day probably, and that's bridging finance. I know, you can take bridging finance for, say, 2 or 3 months. Takes a lot of pressure off. You can effectively own 2 houses. The banks will still do that, won't they?
Yeah, I just spoke to my broker yesterday about this because I felt really bad for the people that offered $100,000 more the other day. Bridging loans work for a lot of people, and my broker actually said some things that was really quite fascinating. He said to me that, he gave an example of one of the big 4 banks that gives buyers 12 months to sell their home at a rate that can be cheaper than if you had already sold your property first.
Wow.
It really does depend on your equity position. Yeah. So it is worth speaking to a good broker because a lot of prospective buyers are missing out on properties because they're not aware of how much better the bridging loans have become.
Good advice, Adam Nobel from Space Property. Good talking to you, mate. Have a good weekend, a busy weekend. Sell plenty of places.
Thanks, mate. Will do, Kevin.
Good on you, Adam Nobel from Space Property.